Welcome, everyone. We have distinguished panelists and distinguished guests today from all over the world. As Senior Director of the Atlantic Council in Turkey and Turkey programs, it is my pleasure to co-host this important and timely discussion on energy cooperation between the EU and Azerbaijan, together with the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. I'm especially pleased to be joined by Ambassador Richard Morningstar, the founding chairman of the Global Energy Center today. Ambassador Morningstar previously served as the US Ambassador to EU and Azerbaijan, as well as the Secretary of State's Special Envoy for Eurasian Energy. And Ambassador Morningstar has played a significant role in bringing the Caspian gas to Europe through the Southern Gas Corridor at that time. I am also proud to have worked alongside the ambassador on this project in my previous capacity.
Thank you, Daphne.
We have important panelists today. Matthew Baldwin is Deputy Director General in the Directorate General for Energy at the European Commission, where he is responsible for the Energy Platform Task Force, which aims to end the EU's dependence on Russian gas as soon as possible. Dr. Vitaly Baylarbayov is the Deputy Vice President of the State Oil Company of Azerbaijan Republic, SOCAR, for Investments and Marketing. Dr. Baylarbayov has over 30 years of experience in the oil and gas industry and holds a PhD in economics. Professor Brenda Sheffer is a research faculty member of the US Naval Postgraduate School and a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Professor Sheffer has also consulted SOCAR during the pivotal years of the Southern Gas Corridor project and is the author of multiple books and an overall expert in energy and politics in the region. The Southern Gas Corridor stands as a remarkable achievement of transatlantic cooperation in the region. Turkey hosts the longest portion of the route, TANAP, carrying gas to Europe from Azerbaijan. The Southern Gas Corridor's importance to European energy security has become increasingly important with Russia's aggression in Ukraine, and the resulting crisis in energy security. In light of recent events, the Memorandum of Understanding to increase exports of Azerbaijan gas to Europe to at least 20 BCM by 2027 is a very significant step. At the same time, there's a widespread acceptance that Europe cannot replace the entirety of the Russian gas supply. Rethinking our energy mix and bolstering alternative forms of energy will be just as crucial. In a note to this reality, the memorandum also calls for a renewable energy cooperation and energy efficiency initiatives, which in the long run will define the energy system. The new MoU, therefore, has short-term, medium-term, and long-term importance and implications. I look forward to hearing our panelists' thoughts on the implications of the agreement and how the goals outlined in the memorandum will be made into reality today. Anyway, without further ado, I'm pleased to hand the floor to Ambassador Morningstar to introduce and kick off the panel. The floor is yours, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you very much, Daphne. It's always wonderful to see you, whether virtually or in person. I can testify that Daphne's been doing just an unbelievable job for the Atlantic Council in Turkey, just very, very vibrant programs. I'm also couldn't be happier to be moderating a panel with three panelists, all of whom are very good friends. It's not often that I moderate a panel where I'm really good friends with everybody. Matthew Baldwin and I have worked together now for over 20 years. Back when he was working with Commissioner Pascal on me, when I was ambassador to the EU. Can't believe it's been that long. Brenda, I started working with Brenda, who's also a very good friend, back in about 2003 or 4 when we were both at the Kennedy School. And also Vitaly for the last many years, going back to when we were discussing prospective pipelines, including the ill-fated Nabucco pipeline. But one of the questions I have today is whether some of Nabucco might be able to be accomplished by this new MOU. So I'm going to start by asking some questions. Also, by the way, before asking the questions, let me say that Matthew and I are both on vacation. Both of us forgot to bring something more formal to work, to be on this panel today. And so I'm sure you'll excuse our informality. Matthew claims he's more dressed better than I am at this point. So on that note, I am going to start with Matthew and ask you to maybe describe for us how the EU sees this MOU with Azerbaijan. And we need to emphasize it is an MOU. I mean, it's not binding. It's a statement of intent, basically. But how you see it, how it contributes to the EU's energy future, and how it ties in and doesn't conflict with a green transition. So, Matthew, maybe you might want to start.
Well, thank you very much, Dick, and greetings to new friends on this call. It's really a pleasure to be with you. Apologies from my boss, Didde Jorgensen, who can't be with you. She's actually traveling today, but she asked me to send the Atlantic Council her warmest, best remarks. It's a really timely discussion, this, because as I think, Daphne, you mentioned, we've just signed the Memorandum of Understanding. My president, Ursula von der Leyen, my commissioner, Kadri Simpson, were in Baku on the 18th of July for the signature. It's a great moment to have a look at what it does. And it's a great chance to have a look at what it can contribute. And if I may, Dick, just to take a minute or two to discuss the broader context in which we see this fitting in. I'm sometimes asked, isn't there a dichotomy with doing these new gas deals and the European Green Deal, the green transition? And really, there's no dichotomy at all. I think Repower EU, our communication back in May, really shows just how we need to rapidly phase out our dependence on gas from Russia, how we need to accelerate our green transition, building on our existing plans, which we call Fit for 55, to save energy and to boost renewables in all their form. But at the same time, we are still going to need gas in our pipes all the way through 2050. Yes, probably a bit less gas over time. If you look at the Repower projections for 2030, that is showing less gas in our system than under Fit for 55. But remember, that's all the Russian gas is coming out by then. There are rich opportunities for reliable suppliers to meet Europe's gas needs. Very quickly on the numbers, we have around 400 BCM of gas a year. Previously, 40% of that was coming from Russia. We want to get out as much as possible out of that this year. I don't need to tell the Atlantic Council the reasons why not. We want to be entirely out, if possible, by 2027. We can already do a lot already. If you just look at this course of this year, we've already cut pipeline gas from Russia down to below 20%. LNG is flowing in unprecedented amounts. If you look at the numbers there, we had 80 BCM in 2021 total. And already by May, we passed the 50 billion mark. I'm very confident now that we will meet or exceed the 15 BCM target agreed by our two presidents, where we modestly talked about striving to ensure what has been a lot of striving and quite a lot of ensuring. And I'm very confident we will meet that 15 BCM figure. And I think we're well on target to meet the 50 BCM target by 2030. But of course, more is needed. And that's why we have the energy platform. And it's been set up by Repower EU. I have the privilege to be running that. And it's really very innovative. It has three functions. Firstly, to coordinate and join up demand, if you like, at the European level and also at the regional level. A lot of the interest in Azerbaijan gas comes out of our Southeast Europe regional group we've already established. Secondly, it involves looking hard at our existing infrastructure, how we can use that most effectively to bring in the additional gas that we need from our new partners. And thirdly, last but not least, we want to reach out really in a big way to the reliable partners. And that's where this MOU, this extraordinary MOU comes into play. We have already recognized in Repower just how significant the Southern Gas Corridor the role that can play. And I pay tribute to everyone on this call who've been laboring hard on this and now very successfully. The SGC can play a major role in diversifying our gas supply, particularly for countries in Southeast Europe. It already represents 3% of the EU's energy supply. And now the expansion of it gives us a real chance to secure those supplies for the future. So the MOU has been signed, as I mentioned, by the two presidents, von der Leyen and President Aliyev, and it really cements the strategic partnership. We overdo those words, but we're really looking for that deep strategic partnership, and not just on gas. It builds on a very long-standing and consolidated energy partnership going all the way back to 2006, in fact, the first memorandum of understanding between our two players. And it really takes stock of the need to intensify those energy relations. We've seen now gas flowing through the SGC since December 2020. We want to move up from the existing 8 BCM to around 12 BCM by 2022 to 2023, and all the way up, we hope, to 20 BCM by 2027. And last but not least, and I will stop there, Dick, I think it cements, and that's why I talk about partnership, our shared ambition to accelerate the development and deployment of both renewable energy generation and transmission capacity. So looking at the whole pattern of things, renewables, energy efficiency, and yes, methane. And I'm happy to talk more about this in the course of this panel. It's a broad and I think a really total partnership, and we're very, very pleased with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That really sets a great context. Let me ask one or two questions before turning to the others. You know, even when the initial TAP pipeline was decided on, and 10 BCM would be going to Europe, a lot of critics said, okay, well, that's nice, but it's, 10 BCM, not a big deal. Likewise, today, they might say, well, another 10 BCM, given the total issue and not being available to 2027, although you mentioned an additional 4 in the interim, not a big deal. So I would ask you to maybe give your views as to why, in fact, is a big deal. And the other question, just briefly, on financing. Is this something that could qualify under the new fiscal taxonomy in the EU? Could we be working, not we, could the parties be working with EBRD, other international financial institutions with respect to financing this work?
Yeah, back to me again. I don't want to hog the panel, but thanks for these two questions. On the first one, I was going to say every little helps, but it's not a little. I mean, talking about an additional 4 BCM and an additional 10 BCM is a substantial amount of gas, and who knows where this leads as the SGC is built out and expanded. If you take it in context, we also announced in July, because we are facing a real demand crunch in the EU, the first European gas demand reduction plan, where member states have now agreed. In fact, it became formal at noon today, our time, so 6 a.m. your time. A new council regulation came into effect, which provides for a 15% best efforts demand reduction plan in the short term. And that's to address a very substantial gap in the worst case scenarios, whereby Russia shuts down gas supply to Europe. So that gas gap at the moment, if we have a normal winter, is 30 BCM, 45 BCM in the context of a much bigger winter. So, we need gas from every source. We are out there looking wherever we can. We're very pleased with the amount of LNG flowing in from the US market. I was in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, seeing about the potential there. We are leaving no stone unturned, and we're really delighted at the readiness and the openness of Azerbaijan to work with us to supply a substantial part of our needs. On the financing part, you'll be aware that the SGC is not one of the projects of common interest. We have included a couple of important TAP projects in that, many of which you know, Centrale Adriatica and Matagiola are part of that overall thing. To be fair, the SGC has never been part of the whole PCI projects, and you'll be aware of indeed that we've said that both under the 10E and under the CEF there won't be new gas. Now that doesn't rule out. You mentioned Dick, the EBRD's potential role, and we are keen to see ways in different ways in which, and we're encouraging, specifically encouraging in the terms of this MOU, private financing of this important corridor, and we are very confident, given the projections, that this financing will be available. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Matthew. Let me go to Vitaly. Vitaly, maybe you can tell us, how is this going to get done? How do you see the timeline of the project? How do you see it happening? How do you intend, even over the next year, to get an additional 4 BCM to the EU? Is there room in TANAP and TAP to do that now? So how is this going to happen?
Thank you, Dick. Thank you all. And I'm also happy to, if not see, but the fact that a lot of participants we have on this session. Some names I recognize, so I'm sending my best wishes with all of you, especially with those whom I know and who joined this conversation. Nice to, if not to see, nice to hear you all via chat or via other means of communication. And thank you again for the question. We already increasing in response to the increased demand and in response to the fact of the crisis, energy crisis, which I'm sure we all witnessing at this very moment in Europe. We already increased the level of our supplies. We managed to increase the level of supplies of gas from Azerbaijan within first 5 months of 2022 by about 26%. And when I completely agree with Matthew mentioned figure of 6% in the overall basket, on the specific markets which are in reach from the Southern Gas Corridor, the role we are playing is much higher. As an example, if we will start with Georgia, to the Georgian market, we are supplying from Azerbaijan about 85 approximately % of their gas needs. Then comes Turkey, and our role in Turkey is changing from time to time, but we are one of the 3 major suppliers. And for example, a couple of years ago, we were number 1 in the supplies of gas to Turkey. In the first quarter of 2022, we were second, but we are among the 3 most important suppliers, say satisfying up to, I would say, 30% of the Turkish gas needs in the current year of 2022. Then going further, there is Bulgaria, and the role we are playing there and response we were able to provide is substantial. First of all, we practically, starting from the 1st July 2022, we practically tripled the volumes of gas we are currently supplying to Bulgargas, our consumer, our buyer, and that was done still in the absence of the working interconnector Greece-Bulgaria. The pipeline is not working, but we manage with close cooperation with Bulgargas, with Greek TESFA, to organize the increased level of supplies, as I said, already tripled. On the daily basis, we are supplying more or less 50%, let's say, of the gas which is currently today coming to Bulgaria. And what is probably also very important, these are regular supplies, i.e. these are the pipeline supplies, i.e. these are guaranteed by contract, of course, by agreement, by technical cooperation of all involved transportation system operators. This is stable supply. In Greece, we are close, let's say, to the 25% of the Greek market, and in Italy, close to 20%. And that, as you and Matthew correctly mentioned, could be increased. could be increased, and we're doing whatever we can. But for that, we need to bring together two most important elements. We need to accelerate and ramp up the development of our upstream resource, main resource, which we are using currently to supply gas to the consumers in the countries I mentioned, with sharp needs. So we are ramping up and accelerating its production. That's one. But we also need to improve the capability of the Southern Gas Corridor system. Stage one of this system was designed to transport approximately, let's say, 16 billion cubic meters of gas, in addition to the gas we were supplying to Turkey via the previously existing leg of the Southern Gas Corridor SCP. So that was supposed to be like 16, and we now using this already system at the edge of its transportation capabilities at the level of 18 billion cubic meters per annum. So we just recently, after the memorandum we are talking about, we completed next stage of technical trials, which would allow us to add additional 1 billion cubic meters of capacity into the capabilities of our transportation system. This is probably the most immediate and obvious response to your question, Dick. So we are trying to accelerate and optimize both our upstream capabilities and our midstream capabilities. Also, in the period of time between now and 2027, which you mentioned, we will actually deploy the wind and solar plants here in Azerbaijan, and producing clean, green electricity there using these sources will allow us to release substantial volume of gas, let's say in the range up to 2 billion cubic meters, which also can, using all options which we provided by the transportation system, go to Europe. But having said that, I need to always to say that these are, let's say, emergency measures. These are measures in immediate as an immediate response to the need which occurred at a certain time. And planning, preparation, strategic thinking is what is required in order to build up more stable, more long-term solutions. That any country we're talking about, and I will use example of Turkey here, needs to think about its security in the constructive way. Look on Turkey, which has already diversified pipeline supplies, 3 main sources, well-organized LNG supplies, and also well-established capacity, storage capacity, underground storage capacity. One of the biggest in Europe it will be, country-wise, and also has its own gas discoveries. So this is the right approach, if you wish, to the building energy security in the vulnerable world we are living in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vitaly. And again, I'll follow up. I might add that 2 of the conditions of the U.S. support back whenever it was, 8, 9, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, for TANAP and a TAP pipeline was that it would be expandable, at least by double, and that double the amount of gas when needed could go through it. I do know that because that's what my job was at that time. Those were very definite conditions for our support. But let me ask you, Vitaly, there was actually an interesting question from the audience already. 2027, how did that date come about? Is that what you think realistically is the time necessary to complete the project? Maybe I'll ask you a couple of questions that you could just answer briefly. Second, back at the time when the original project was approved and TAP was approved, we were talking about basically a smaller Nabucco type pipeline going through the Eastern Balkans. Is that something that the parties would be interested in now? I don't know whether Matthew wants to jump in on that one. And the third thing that I will ask you about and then go to Brenda is what about Turkmen gas? As you and Brenda well know, I've often said that any kind of Trans-Caspian pipeline won't happen during my lifetime, but I'm 77 years old now, so all things are possible. What is the possibility of Turkmen gas, and what does Azerbaijan think about that?
I probably will start, but I don't want, of course, you kind of spread this question over three of us. I will start with explaining why 2027. This is the earliest when transportation infrastructure we are talking about can be expanded in the proper way. And I should admit that this is optimistic estimate made by pipeline operators. When talking about that, I don't want to complicate the conversation, but there are three pipelines run by three different consortia, which are connected with adjustment to the systems in Greece, in Italy, in Bulgaria. And when we are talking about TAP or TANAP or SCP, the estimate of approximately 60 months, which could be plus or minus, depending on the future circumstances, is required in order to have this system of the pipelines fully expanded. So that's where the estimate of the doubling comes from, primarily technical issues, as well as investment phases, which are already known and checked and studied here in Azerbaijan or in any other part of the world. If you want to develop substantial new or existing reserve, usually between 3 to 5 years is required to have everything which is required in place. Some of those reserves, which again very well known to the world, it is Umid field developed by SOCAR proper. It's Absheron field developed by SOCAR and French Total. It is non-associated gas from ACG, where the whole ACG consortia is involved. Some of those could be developed faster. Some of those will require definitely this period of time of 5 years. But these fields I mentioned, together with the future stages, third and fourth, which I was mentioning before in our conversations, of Shah Deniz, will constitute the basis for the doubling of the supplies the memorandum is talking about by 2000 or around 2027, I would say. This is possible, this is doable if we all, who is involved, and that is a bunch of the investors, bunch of the transporters, policymakers, European institutions, regulators, and of course consumers, buyers of our gas will work together in the best optimized and very much accelerated manner. Dick, you know very well how long it took us to have the first phase. I don't think that we need another 3 years, but we need substantial time in order to align everything, which is not aligned at the moment, into one transportation or value chain, allowing this to happen. Thank you.
Okay, what about Turkmenistan? I've already gotten 4 questions as to what the state of Trans-Caspian gas is. Is that even coming from the middle of the Caspian, with small amounts coming across? Is that something that ought to be part of the plans for expansion, or are you doing this without even thinking about Turkmenistan?
Well, nobody is doing anything without thinking about the resources from available or reachable in the future. But all considerations we put behind this memorandum are only considerations based on Azerbaijani own resources. If there will be further interest from those who has substantial resources, being from Turkmenistan, being from any other country which is legitimately capable of delivering their gas into our system, we will be just welcoming that and cooperating with them by all available to us means.
Do you think, just on another point, do you think more of an emphasis on renewables in Azerbaijan would free up more gas to go to Europe. Is that
Yes.
something being looked at?
Yes, without any doubt. And that is good. That's good for those who needs our gas, and this is good for us who will be benefiting from the development of this technology.
Yeah. And I know
In the first place, we clearly have solar and wind because our country is, let's say, famous for each. But we are not, do not exclude biomethane also, and we doing that already, as I said. There are contracts signed in the mainland of Azerbaijan with many companies. We're talking about BP, we're talking about Masdar, we're talking about Aqua Power. Those are already working on our liberated territories and on the rest of the territories.
Yeah, and I know that Azerbaijan is committed to reaching aggressive goals in reducing carbon emissions by 2030 and into the future.
You're right.
And then just the last thing I had asked you about, and maybe you don't, I don't know if you have a comment on it. Do you see more opportunities for the Eastern Balkans? More gas going Bulgaria, Romania, on into Hungary, the way Nabucco was supposed to do by this expansion. Is that something you even think about, or just something that the stakeholders overall have to consider?
This definitely is in our plans, and we're looking on that very serious. And even the memoranda itself, by the way, speaks about Western Balkans as one of the future destinations for the gas from the Caspian, as well as, of course, we're working closely. I mentioned already our cooperation with our Bulgarian friends and colleagues, as well as Romanian friends and colleagues. We're working very closely with them, investigating an opportunity to reach these countries through the existing systems or the new systems with the further gas. We cannot satisfy all needs, and we don't pretend to say that we can do that. But the more markets are reachable via the Southern Gas Corridor is better for us and better for those markets.
Great. Thanks, Vitaly, for all of those answers. It's really terrific. And now I'll turn to my good friend, Brenda. And Brenda, I want to focus on, maybe you're talking about the geopolitics. What's the U.S. interest in all of this? What concerns might there be about Russia, if any? What about Turkey's interest? How does this affect the overall geopolitics of the region?
Right. So, I mean, traditionally, as your career illustrates, energy security was always a strong component of U.S. national security. And it wasn't just energy security of the United States, but energy security globally and specifically of U.S. allies and, especially Europe. So I think, if we look at the history of the Southern Gas Corridor, 7 countries, 6 regulatory systems, 12 investors, 12 gas buyers, trying to get that almost, aircraft carrier, out and established, even on time and significantly below budget. It couldn't have been done by market forces alone. It was a strategic vision of Azerbaijan to have a closer relationship with Europe and to be, a partner with Europe. It was Turkey's strategic vision to be a reliable transit state and also to have a close relationship with Europe. But it was successive EU commissions that engaged in looking forward for energy security, not just current needs, but future needs. But certainly the really flagship role of the United States, and again, nonpartisan, started under President Bill Clinton, the whole vision of Caspian energy to the West. It continued under the Bush administration, under a lot of push under the Obama administration, and continued under the Trump administration. So this has been the traditional American way, was to think of these type of infrastructure projects, these type of energy security. Unfortunately, if we look at the current White House interim strategic strategy, the words energy security don't appear. Where energy appears, it appears 10 times, but 7 out of the 10 in the combination of clean energy. So we all need to get back to remembering that energy security is an integral part of national security. You don't have your independence, you don't have your prosperity without proper energy supplies.
Okay. Uh, what about Russia?
Yeah, so I think
how much of a role would Russia play in this situation? What are the risks with respect to Russia? It's not in their interest, particularly, that more gas be coming from the Caspian into Europe. How serious do you think that risk is?
Yeah, well, I think it's not by chance that this week we're seeing, escalation in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. A couple months before the commercial operations of the Southern Gas Corridor started in October 2020, we see Armenia, which is, there's 3 Russian bases in Armenia, attacks the hills above the Southern Gas Corridor. And, certainly it would be trivial to say that Russia often uses energy as a weapon of geopolitics. Look at the current situation of Kazakhstan, where essentially its oil is being disrupted, the exports to international markets. So sure, this is not an easy situation. Probably the best thing to remove that lever from Russia is actually something really good that Europe is doing, which is engaging very seriously in resolution of the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. It's important to understand that in the views of the main adversaries, Russia is hard to really imagine, Russia having a constructive role there. But I think the European efforts right now to resolve the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is probably one of the best ways to remove those levers of outside influence to disrupt the security of the region.
You see Russia, and it's hard to predict, I guess, using overt influence, either in a concrete way or through a bully pulpit and interfering with development, even if let's say with respect to a Trans-Caspian gas or increased gas going through the expanded infrastructure that we're talking about. Is this a real? How big a question do you think this is?
It's always a risk, but I think the current developments in the region, post-Russian invasion, second invasion of Ukraine, the stoppage of Kazakhstani oil. I think most of the countries in the region understand that they need to cooperate together in order to survive this strategic environment. The growing infrastructure ties growing between, let's say, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan and Turkey. I think the countries of the region realize that the only way to survive this new strategic environment is actually to work stronger together. And I think it's not just a slogan, but I think you're seeing a lot of increased cooperation among the countries of the region.
That's a good segue into what Turkey's interests are. How does this fit in? How does this all fit into Turkey's interests? How do they balance? How does Turkey balance its relationships? Is this something that you think Turkey is fully committed to? And just your views on that. And Daphne, if you wanted to jump in on that, feel free.
Yeah, I think Vitaly referred to the state of Turkish energy security. The fact that Turkey actually planned its energy sector so well over the years, it's enabling. It doesn't have to absorb itself to its own domestic market now, new supplies from Azerbaijan, but actually can transit them and play this positive role. So I think we can learn lessons from how Turkey worked here. One, understanding the real numbers. Gas was going to be essential for decades to come, and not something that you could think, I won't commission more gas and somehow renewables will appear. Turkey invested in storage and mandated storage. So while Europe was getting rid of storage mandates, Turkey was expanding the storage. And again, diversification. You're a lot less susceptible to the energy weapon if you have a diversified market. So I think first thing we can learn from, and maybe a final point, you have to keep the state involved in energy security, the government. Market forces alone are not going to bring energy security. Europe unfortunately is learning this now. US is starting to learn this too with, refinery capacity. You need government not to do it themselves, but to be out there thinking what are the needs over time, because you can't just snap your fingers. And we need to also think, we observed, anyone who follows European energy security, there were two energy crises before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The winter 2020, winter 2021, there were already shortages, high prices, prices that already triggered the current food crisis, even before the Russian, the cutoff of grain supplies, because natural gas prices went so high in Europe and the UK. A lot of fertilizer factories closed down, creating shortages for fertilizers, already hurting the crops of 2021 and and already creating a food crisis before the Russian invasion. So we need to learn lessons that it's not just enough, let's say the Ukraine crisis is resolved, and I believe Europe needs to take a new look at how it got to that situation. And just remember, when you're maximalist about, no fossil fuels, right? Well, what happened was in these past two winter crises, the utilities and heat were not, okay, I don't have enough gas, so I'll use more renewables, because they weren't there. I'm going to use coal and fuel oil. So it's better in terms of pollution, emissions, to plan use of natural gas versus having to use more coal and fuel oil. And I think both the US and Europe needs to be honest with their publics that natural gas, it's not perfect, but it sure is a lot better than the alternatives in terms of climate and pollution. And like I said, Turkey had a much more conservative policy on this. It understood, it looked at the numbers, and even though it was rolling out renewables, it was expanding LNG, but it kept diversified gas supplies coming into its market. And that's why it's in a better shape than a lot of its neighbors.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Daphne would like to jump in, I think, to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to make the comment that from a pure geopolitical standpoint, Turkey, I think, is playing an important role as a balance to Russia within the region. And I think that's going to continue to be important. But in any event, Daphne, your point, whatever you would like to add.
Thanks, Dick. Thank Brenda. I think on the top of what Brenda has already very well summarized, I would like to add that the Southern Gas Corridor is the first step for Turkey to diversify, away from Russia. So it shouldn't be forgotten. And Turkey at that time played an important role, and will will continue to play that important role as well with the expansion of the pipeline, and so that Turkey can deliver more gas to Europe. So this needs to be underlined. But on the other hand, there's a responsibility, the role also brings a responsibility to Turkey as well, just as a regional player, and one thing that also Brenda underlined is that, enhancing regional cooperation also will be important, I think, and this move, as we look into the details of this memorandum of understanding between Azerbaijan and EU, it also involves a lot of elements about, meeting the COP, the Paris Agreement, conditions, and also renewable energy efficiency, renewable gas investments. So it is not only about, of course, pipelines. So there are a lot of elements there, which I think Turkey will be also part of all this, the regional development. As we move forward, this is what I'd like to add. As we, and like to just put the discussion again between, this agreement between EU and Azerbaijan. Thanks, Dick.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. I want to get back to Matthew with a couple of questions. We've covered most of the things that are in the Q&A function right now. But one last thing with you, Brenda, that I wanted to ask: what more concretely can the U.S. do, or should the U.S. do, to cooperate in furthering this project? Does the U.S. have a role, and what would you encourage the U.S. to do? Yeah,
so I think the issue of public financing, I think, if it seems still not, not there in terms of Europe. Maybe it seems like American public finance institutions have been more open to still financing natural gas projects. So I think that could be an important role for the United States. We're seeing, in some places in Africa, still they've been willing to do public finance for natural gas, and this is, obvious, a place where there's been a strong U.S. interest and where the administration is.
Okay, great. Let me ask Matthew a couple of, maybe three questions that sort of are a conglomerate of some of the questions that people have been asking in the chat. First of all, Matthew, what about the role of hydrogen, if any? If you might, comment on that. A second question related to the issues that involving the TAP pipeline, involving the entry into Italy that took years really to solve from an environment because of environmental opposition and so forth. How do you see environmental opposition with respect to these projects, and how do you handle it? And then a third one that's sort of a difficult question that I've had to deal with during my whole career, the human rights aspects. How does that fit into it? There have been questions, I think it's fair to say, in both Azerbaijan and Turkey particularly. Is this something that should be even related to all the things that we're talking about, or does it play any kind of role, or does that just get dealt with on a separate track?
Thanks very much for those questions, Dick. And if I may just quickly, before I forget, comment on a couple of things I've also heard from the brilliant contributions from co-panelists. Briefly on what Brenda said, I mean, I think she put this in the context of our leverage, if you like, on the Azerbaijani-Armenia conflict. But I think all of this, from a European perspective, is about removing the leverage of Russia on, de-weaponizing, if you like, gas, which is what they've been trying to do. And it's not just they've weaponized gas in terms of volumes, they're weaponizing in terms of prices. It's hard to read it otherwise in terms of the way they're manipulating the market. So in the short term, we need to reduce our short-run demand, and we're not afraid to do that. Some tough choices, that's why we come with the demand reduction plan. But at the same time, we need to build our supply and build new partnerships with reliable friends. I also want to endorse, Brenda, what you said about the need for vision. And it's an overused word in politics and in policy, but I think in relation to these kind of big pipeline projects, it's essential. And I really pay tribute to the work of you, Dick, and others, and you, Brenda, in terms of keeping that ball going through successive administrations, but also elsewhere. And you're right to mention Turkey's vision longer term for that. We, I think, have learned a bit about that too. From our past mistakes in terms of storage. We've now got a binding storage regulation in the EU, which requires an 80% fillage by the end of this year, 90% next year. And we're at 70% now, which is pretty historically high given the very high prices. So we're doing pretty well on that front. And that's also part of our overall security net, if you like, for the forthcoming point. I also want to pick up quickly on what Vitalia said about renewables. I was so pleased to hear your unequivocal endorsement on that, and that is part of Azerbaijan's future strategy, and it is indeed a crucial part of our future partnership. And if I could bring into that context hydrogen too, which I know you have a strong interest in, and then it's really up to us to make sure together that the new infrastructure is hydrogen ready to promote this longer term energy transition in that context. And in that context, of course, it brings me, and this was in the question in the chat, to methane, where, as you know, we launched this big partnership with the US at COP26 last year. We have the global methane pledge. We think it will be a great thing for Azerbaijan to do as soon as possible. We think you're very well placed to do this, to join the global efforts. And I think there's some good interim steps, which we'd like you to encourage to take there in the context of this, such as the prompt implementation of the UNEP methane emission measurement study project, your accession to the oil and gas methane partnership, and so on and so forth. And let's continue to use this partnership to facilitate those things. So I'm sorry, Dick, those are my quick comments. I also wanted to just endorse what Vitalia said about the Eastern Balkans point. I'm hesitant to use this in case it becomes a sort of quotable, but there could be a sort of a Nabucco there, coming out of this thing. We've already got the Brewer Phase 1 coming into force, coming into effect. And this is all very promising. And I entirely agree with what he said. This is a win-win-win-win solution. It's good for Azerbaijan, it's good for the entire region, West and Eastern Balkans, as well as the whole EU, to facilitate an additional source of supply. So I think I've tackled one question there, which is the vital role of hydrogen in the future. That's also central to the way we see the energy platform developing. You mentioned environmental opposition, and it's an interesting one. I think it goes back to the broad energy policy we're now developing. And I've talked a lot to my green friends in the European Parliament and elsewhere. And I think there is a real understanding that we need to diversify our gas supply. Again, we're not talking about more gas coming on as a result of this. We're talking about gas from different sources. And by the way, yes, Brenda, you're right. That's meant in different places and different, some quite brave decisions by green energy ministers to reconnect with coal and heavy fuel oil because they have no alternatives. And I think this is a consequence of our having put our eggs, it's a chicken and egg situation, is my one half decent joke on this. And we put all our eggs in one basket. Now the chickens are coming home to roost. And the eggs we put our basket in was called pipeline gas from Russia. And now's the time to get out of that. And I think the Greens understand that. I think there is a broad understanding about the need for gas as a transition fuel. And as I keep saying, gas from other more reliable sources. On human rights, this is not a question which the EU tries to duck any place, anywhere, anytime. It's not a subject of our memorandum of understanding, precisely because we've got a very good dialogue on these issues with Azerbaijan and all our third country partners. We're not trying to decouple things. We're not trying to hide things. We're always ready to discuss human rights in a full and frank, and I like to say friendly way with all our partners in this context. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers on all of that, Matthew. And I'm prompted to ask you one more question. And you mentioned that the EU putting all its eggs in one basket and so forth. Although I think the EU has made progress in the last 10 or 12 years. Certainly it's one of the areas I've been working on. And, you know, the US has been pushing for the EU to Europe to reduce its dependence. In that light, what do you think the US can do? Do we have any role? Does the US have any role in all that we're talking about? How can the US be helpful without looking like it's just, oh, here's the US interfering again?
I think, thank you for that. I think we're very happy with the current state of our transatlantic energy relationship. We've got this vibrant energy council. It works at a number of different levels. We have, I think, a vibrant dialogue about how we can best help each other. A lot of people said, and they're not completely wrong, that this big surge in LNG coming from the US is, of course, simply a market effect, and the prices are great in Europe, so why wouldn't they want to send LNG over here with these great prices? I totally get that. But I think there's a real dialogue going on about how we can develop these longer-term relationships, not just with Azerbaijan, but also in the US. I know there's interest in long-term contracts on the part of US companies. And I think our message about we will still need gas all the way through to 2050 is starting to come home. And so I think these partnerships are great. But above and beyond that, I think this is one of the areas where the US continues to play a very important global role, as you have done, Vic, and as Brenda you've done, and everyone is doing, to pursue these issues. Because at the end, our energy security has to be seen globally, not just purely nationally. It doesn't work that way, and so that's why it's all connected.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I don't know if you are going to want to have any closing comments, but I'll, for now, let me go to Brenda and Vitaly. Maybe starting with Vitaly.
I think I said more than enough, so I'll shut up. And thank you very much for the chance to join this panel, everyone.
Oh, hey, you're welcome to come back. I mean, you know, in a few minutes after they give their closing comments, if you have anything. So Vitaly, any closing comments that you have? But along with your closing comments, there was one question in the chat that, you know, and it's an important question in the Q&A, and it's an important one. You know, we've been focusing on gas because that's the focus of the MOU. There's a lot of oil too that comes through Azerbaijan. Is there any way that you see oil increasing going through the BTC that could help with the supply of oil at all? If you want to just give a brief answer to that, as well as any closing comments.
Let me try. Each of those areas we're talking about took years of my life. So answering on them in 5 minutes in time interval will be quite difficult, challenging at least. I'm kind of tempted immediately to start describing you the situation with oil, while even with gas, we didn't cover the whole picture.
Right.
But to answer to those who is concerned, and I went through the questions also, for example, where gases will be coming from. Again, the answer to those who is asking this question, the gas is coming primarily from Azerbaijan and the fields I named. And those are fields where gas has been already discovered. And we are talking about next phase of development of Absheron and next phase of development of Umit, or non-associated gas of ACG, or next phases of Chardonnay. This is all existing reserves. And all these reserves need is the investments, funding, whether public or private, but funding to be organized and putting together the interest of the users of this important resource which we have available. And also making this more clear for the concern about environmental aspects and the rest. Southern Gas Corridor has been already built, and pipelines and pipes, more importantly, which will be required for the doubled Southern Gas Corridor are already there. We will not be building additional pipelines. Maybe in certain territories, you need a bit of land in order to add compressor or compressors, but there will be no further pipe added. We already spent the money. We spent money. We from Azerbaijan spent money with the assistance of the financial institutions and private partners from all over the world. We spent already money and we laid pipes which are twice bigger than we are transporting now. What we need to move more gas using more compression power, more pressure. And people who were concerned that their olive trees will suffer, or their territories will suffer in Italy, or in Greece, or in Georgia, or in Turkey, because they were everywhere. They now see that the pipeline is working, that olive trees are back, and they produce olives. And where those died, not because of us, but because of the Xylella virus or bacteria, those trees were replaced by us at our own expense. And those trees they have. And I know people who are telling me that they basically got richer because of that, because they are already not so well-being olive gardens were basically replaced by the others. And similar in Greece, some communes in Greece are enjoying the support from TAP and TAP company in getting hot water, in getting energy, in getting other benefits, including schools, including medical centers. We are good citizens of the society. And these 4 years of existence of the Southern Gas Corridor, and only second year of its supplies to Europe already proved that to all of those who had doubts. I pretty much doubt that there will be protests or serious grounded protests against the activities of this pipeline. This pipeline is very modern. This pipeline expansion will be hydrogen and other biomethanes ready system. It is something which we all will be benefiting from. We all living in Azerbaijan, which is a great country where rights of the people are properly protected and observed and supported by their government. And that is my answer to those who is asking other questions, whether those issues should be brought into conversation here. Yes, you feel free to bring these issues into the conversation, but we are proud people of Azerbaijan who will be developing our own resources for the benefit of our nation and others who is interested in those. Thank you very much, Dick, for ability to make this.
Okay, thank you, Vitaly, and it's always a pleasure to have you because it's so important to have on a panel somebody who really knows how all this works, and that's great. And we'll, in some other program, we'll get to oil. Excuse me. Brenda, your closing comments.
Yeah. So Matthew mentioned the ability of Russia to set prices in Europe, to rev them up, to rev them down. But Russia has that ability because Europe set up the system in the way with moving away from long-term contracts into hub pricing, meaning that this was something, that could have been anticipated. I have to admit, in congressional testimony in 2014, it sounded very nerdy at the time that but the hub pricing would create geopolitical problems. But this is again it was a decision that yes, one actor is doing this, but it's taking advantage of a system that was set up for it. So if Russia's the swing producer in Europe, it's always going to have the ability to rev up the prices or reduce the prices, for instance, when it wants to compete with US or other LNG supplies. So I think Europe, it was a great move on the storage, quick and important, but also needs to think more about long-term contracts, just like the Southern Gas Corridor was able to bring in supplies with 25-year contracts with having exemptions. And we see that Greece and Italy are weathering these crises, even 2020, 2021, better than places that don't have these pipeline supplies that, as Vitaly pointed out in the case of Bulgaria, it's not just Azerbaijani gas coming into Bulgaria, but coming in contracted gas that they can rely on, that they can plan for, and also at a predictable price. So if Europe not only doesn't want to be an object of volatility because of Russia, but also not subject to competition with Asia, you can't build an energy policy based on good weather in Asia, right? So if you don't want to be subject to also the volatility of LNG prices, need to allow your gas buyers in Europe or even encourage them to go back to long-term contracts.
Thank you, Brenda. And, it makes the point salient that this project that we're talking about today, under the MOU, will not be successful without contracts. There's going to have to be guaranteed purchasing of what comes through on this project. And thank you also for all of your comments. And Matthew, I'll give you one last chance if you'd like to say anything further.
No, I think I'll be very brief because I spoke too much already. I think the comments that have been made right now from Brenda and Vitaly are very germane. We are serious about long-term contracts. I really want to send that signal, and we sent that signal privately and publicly to companies in the US, to countries in Azerbaijan, like Azerbaijan and elsewhere, and it's a serious commitment on our side. In the short term, of course, we are not afraid to be buying spot LNG. So we are in the market for gas at the same time as we're driving down the energy transition. And in this kind of partnership enhancing call, I'm confident of our ability to weather this storm and to come out the other side in a good shape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. And I might say that through all the years that I've known you and working so closely with you in the past, I don't think there could be a better person to be partnering or working with Ditte Juul-Jorgensen to get all that needs to be accomplished, to get it all accomplished. So it's great that you're back involved in.
She's the boss, but thanks for that kind word.
And I think, Daphne, you wanted to give a last word, and then I'll close it off.
No, thank you. We are all will be looking forward to implementation of this memorandum of understanding, that's for sure, as players in the region. And I'd like to thank once more to our great panelists and you, Dick, great moderation. Thank you so much. And please close up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daphne. We're a little bit over, not too much over, but our time has come to a close. I want to thank everybody in the audience for tuning in. And especially to Daphne and our fantastic panelists for their time and their contributions to this critically important discussion. And I want to thank, in general, the Atlantic Council in Turkey and the Global Energy Center for their help in putting this together. And all the people who helped on this. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. I hope not. Grady Wilson, who does such a great job, along with Patty Ryan, also doing a great job. Our intern, Selin Kumbarachi, if I'm pronouncing it right, who is from Turkey, Mackenzie Clark, Lizzie Bowen, and Eamon Coughlin. So all of you have done a great job. Please join us for future events. we have the latest episode of our energy source innovation stream with Block Power this Monday at 10 a.m. And we also have a U.S.-Iceland Clean Energy Summit on Wednesday, September 21st. More information on the website. And Daphne would kill me if I didn't mention the October summit. And I think Daphne is at October 10th or 10th.
10-11 in Istanbul. Yes.
In Istanbul, a Clean Energy Summit where Atlantic Council in Turkey, the Global Energy Center, and EBRD are working together for this very important summit. So again, I think this has been a fantastic presentation by our outstanding panelists and Daphne. And so I'll sign off until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.